we are going to look at all things food labeling. Now, I hope you got a lot out of the first week, the first set of videos and trainings, and hopefully you did all the homework because uh, that's where we make a lot of the biggest impact in our lives, our families' lives, the health of our kids is by doing the work. Okay, so we're going to jump right in to food labels, food labeling, reading ingredients lists, and all that kind of stuff. So food labels, what the heck do they mean, right? Because this is one of the most common questions we get about nutrition and about eating is what are all those things on food labels? How do I know what to eat? All that kind of stuff, right? So here's a question that I get on a regular basis. Doc, food labels are so confusing. How do I know what ingredients are okay to eat? And my answer, if it has a label, don't eat it. Now, I know that's simplistic, right? And really even not entirely 100% accurate for even myself, but in principle, it has a lot of truth to it because food is an ingredient. Food is typically not a mixture of ingredients. Now, when we make food, when we prepare it, when we cook, and things like make things from scratch in our own houses, then yes, we add multiple ingredients to one dish and eat that way. But when we're purchasing the basic constituents to make those meals, ideally we're buying stuff that has no ingredients list, or if it does, it's got one ingredient, and that's the food itself. So if it has a label, don't eat it, right? So real food, actual food, usually doesn't need a list of ingredients. And if there is a list of ingredients, this usually equals some sort of processing or processed food. Now, the more ingredients, typically the more processed, especially if there's ingredients you don't recognize or you can't pronounce, things that are have multiple descriptors in them, like autolyzed yeast extract. I mean, I've heard of yeast extract. I don't know, autolyzed, what the heck does that mean, right? So this is indicating its level of processing. And processing in and of itself isn't necessarily a big problem. If I'm going to eat a cantaloupe, like we have one at our house right now, I'm going to process it. I'm going to cut it. I'm going to scoop the seeds out. Maybe I'll peel the skin off. That's all processing. But in the food industry, when we go to grocery stores and that type of thing, usually processing indicates some sort of process that the food has undergone that's changing, decreasing, and diminishing its healthful capacity or adding toxins and chemicals to the deal. So typically if there's a list of ingredients, and also the more ingredients, the more processed it is. So in terms of ingredients, if we are going to be buying food that has ingredients lists, we do need to know, like, where do we start, right? What do these ingredients mean? How do I know what to eat, what not to eat? So many times the most harmful chemicals and additives are hidden in the food labels. Often it's not going to say, X and such food, and then, excitotoxic chemical, right? It's going to be hidden. And the chemical industry / food industry is very sneaky about some of these processes. So the most common labels we see that indicate brain damaging, nervous system damaging, body damaging additives, excitotoxins, neurotoxins, and these type of food additives and chemicals are natural flavors, right? I mean, that sounds benign. It's natural and it's flavors. Yeast extract, I mentioned that before. Maltodextrin, who the heck knows what that is, right? Barley malt, barley sounds like food. Malt, Soy protein isolate, isn't soy good for you? Isn't protein good for you? What's wrong with that? And then anything that has hydrolyzed or autolyzed in front of it. These are all very sneaky ways to hide essentially what is MSG, monosodium glutamate, which is very problematic, and it really attacks and injures our brain and our nervous system. Now, if you didn't know, our brain and our nervous system are vital to not just being alive, but to expressing our full potential and to being healthy and for our kids to be healthy. And especially with kids, when their brain is growing so fast, which it does, particularly in the first couple of years of life, but all the way through childhood and to adulthood, the brain is growing, learning, it's establishing new connections. We want to do everything we can to keep it healthy and to not injure and damage the brain. So to eat things on a regular basis that have these type of chemicals in them really impedes that normal process of brain growth and development. Now, there's a lot more we can get into around these excitotoxins and the neurotoxins in these chemicals. It goes beyond the scope of what we're going to cover in this 21-day family reset. We do have other programs that go into more depth on some of this stuff. If that's something of interest, you can find us and get some more info on that. So what about the process? So absolutely, step number one, when you're buying things at the grocery store and you're wanting to make healthier changes, healthier choices, read the labels, read the ingredients list. But there's really more to the story than just what's in the food, what the ingredients are. And more than the macronutrients, the fat and the carbohydrates and those type of things. We get so pigeonholed into that, and that gets so much attention. It has this many calories, has this many fat grams, saturated fat, unsaturated fat, carbohydrates, fiber. And it's good to know those things, but there is so much more to the story than just that information. That's so superficial in terms of its health qualities, its vital potential, or its chemicals and damaging potential. So one thing to know and to keep in mind and to really explore and find out is how the food was grown. Is it been bathed in pesticides and herbicides? Is it made from genetically modified organisms? Was the food picked before it's ripe? This is a common practice these days with food transport and things coming from all over the world, that certain fruits and vegetables are picked way before they're ever ripe, and so that they don't spoil in transport. And then in a lot of cases, they're treated with a chemical that forces them to artificially ripen. Tomatoes are the perfect example of this. It's very difficult to find a tomato these days that actually has the flavor, texture, and feel of a truly ripe tomato, like one you might have grown in your own backyard, because they're picked when they're rock hard and green, transported, stored that way, and then right before they go to the grocery store, they're sprayed with a chemical that forces the flesh to turn red, but it really doesn't, involve the whole ripening process, which is such an important part of our interaction with our ecosystem and the sort of holistic nature of nature, and that we are a part of. That when foods are ripest, when they taste the best to us, is when they have the most nutrient capacity and give us the most nourishment. The next thing to consider is, how was this food prepared? So if it's not just the raw ingredients, like a tomato, or an apple, if it's somehow been put together, if there's a label, there's ingredients list, there's multiple things in one package, how was it prepared? Was it put through an incredibly high heat process? Was it under high pressure? Was there chemical bleaching? These are all things that happen very frequently in the food industry. And nowadays with the internet, we have the ability to see some of this happen. I just saw a video the other day about conventional hot dogs, and it had all of those: high heat, high pressure, and chemical bleaching. And not that I ate those things before, but shoot, if I ever needed some motivation not to eat that, I got it from that. These are things that happen with like soybeans and soy products. So tofu, it's this little white block you get of squishy, stuff. It's not like they just pulled the soybean, kind of chopped it up, and it made that block. I mean, it goes through an intense process to get to that form. And all of those things, the high heat, the high pressure, the chemical treatments, they strip away the vital nutrients and the enzymes, and turn some of the other chemicals and fats and things like that rancid, and turn things that could be potentially beneficial and nutritive to actually harmful for our bodies. Like pasteurization destroys all of the enzymes and nutrients in dairy, and so it turns this one of the most healthful products on the planet really into one of the most damaging and least healthful, just by that high heat process. And then, how was the food packaged and transported? Is it put into plastics or cans and that type of thing? Has it been preserved for shelf life? So things like pasteurization, we just mentioned that, irradiation. What are they doing to the food to make it so that it has better shelf life? And that's really the whole reason for pasteurization. I mean, let's just cut to the chase here. Pasteurization is not done by the food industry for our safety. Pasteurization is done to make the stuff last longer. That's why they have ultra pasteurized now. They really, heat the crap out of that stuff so that no microorganisms are living, so that it doesn't spoil as fast. Irradiation is something that they're doing to meats to do the same thing, but it doesn't just destroy sort of selectively just harmful organisms. It destroys all the beneficial stuff as well. And then, plastics with the BPAs and all that, and can linings too. We have to be aware of all these things because we don't live in a culture, in a society that's really anywhere close to our genetic needs in terms of food. We did for, a million plus years. Hunting, gathering, even an agrarian society was a lot closer because we grew the food, we had a relationship with it. Now we go to this building, with artificial lights and shelves and pull things off of shelves that are prepackaged. And so this may seem like a lot to have to deal with, how is it grown? How is it treated? How is it packaged? But it's vital and it's necessary to really take back control over your health and your family's health and the health of your kids. So your best bet in all of this, because this can be a lot, it can be a little overwhelming. The simplest way to look at it is if great grandma wouldn't recognize it, don't eat it, right? So that means that if you think about it, our great grandparents, and I say great, some people say if your grandma, but depends on your age, right? But our great grandparents, they didn't even have grocery stores like we have now. If you wanted food, you either got it from a farmer or you grew it yourself. And I mean, they had general stores with certain things, but not like we do now, where we rely on a single location, a single distribution system for all of our food in a lot of cases. Everybody used to grow gardens, at least for their fresh items. We don't do that anymore as a culture. So if great grandma wouldn't recognize it as food, then you're best off not eating it. So if you want to take one takeaway, one thing to keep with you the whole time, you could go with our first statement. If it's got an ingredient list or a label, don't eat it. It's a little more challenging for a lot of people. So if you can go with this one. If great grandma wouldn't recognize it, then don't eat it. Okay, so homework for this lesson should be pretty obvious. Start reading labels if you don't already. If you do, start looking for those sneaky things. Look for ingredients that you don't recognize as actually being food, like tomato, vinegar, rice, whatever, things that are actually food, things that have other names to them. And understand that those things are added for a lot of reasons, none of which have to do with your health and your benefit in terms of your body having a good health potential. So start reading labels, start looking for anything you have. Well, actually, let me back up. Read labels, but the first step in that is at your own house, in your own kitchen. Go through your cupboards, go through your pantry, go through all the storage places, primarily with stuff that's not refrigerated. Start there. Anything that has stuff from that list I mentioned, with the maltodextrin and soy protein isolate, get rid of it. Just get rid of it. Don't eat it thinking, I won't buy it again. Just get rid of it. Then go through stuff in your fridge, right? Same idea. And then next time you go to the grocery store, think about, stop, be aware, be conscious. Look at ingredients, labels, and on anything you might be buying. And if there's something that you really want, really like, and the ingredients label is looking pretty rough, then see what you can do to find a different brand, a different product. Or, we live in this miraculous world of the internet. We carry little computers around in our pockets a lot of times. Look it up online. You can find any recipe nowadays that has a much healthier option than sort of that standard processed thing. The simplest way, the way I find the simplest to get these good recipes is write paleo, fill in the blank. So lasagna, paleo lasagna, so on and so forth. And some of them are going to be closer to tasting and seeming, looking and like what you're expecting. Some of them are a little further, but that's okay. We can all adapt. All right, so that's your homework. We'll be back in a couple days with our next lesson where we dive a little deeper into things like organics and GMOs and that type of stuff. So kind of continuing on this trend of looking at what it is that we're eating and how it's been treated and what steps we really have to take to thrive in this modern world. All right, you guys take care, and we'll see you next time.